Metal scraped steel slicing through Boone County's quiet at 4:37 p.m. Karen Halbrook never slowed her SUV, skimmed my tractor's rear axle, and pinned an unsightly equipment notice beneath the wiper blade. I raised my phone and caught her hand the paper and the wheel rim in one frame while harvest dust still hung in the air. The barn camera's red LED blinked twice small as a heartbeat, and I knew the next line in my ledger would not be about corn. The barn clock chimed once as I pulled out my phone and framed the scene, bent reflector scuff of white paint her SUV angled too close. Dust hung sharp in the air, scratching the back of my throat. At the edge of the lane, a neighbor's curtain lifted, then fell back again. I caught the blink of the security camera's red LED, quiet but persistent, as if it were my silent witness. Section 8.4 of the bylaws, she announced, unfolding a printed page. All equipment must be stored out of sight. This is non-compliant. I stepped down from the cab boots, pressing into the brittle dirt. That section applies to permanent storage, not harvest use. She didn't blink. It applies as written. This is harvest, Karen. The corn won't wait for your board. Her lips pressed into a smile too thin to last. I'm issuing this citation. She tucked the folded paper under my wiper blade as though it were gospel. I raised my phone, snapped the print the edge of her SUV and the chipped paint on my fender. The camera clicked soft but steady, a record etched in pixels. Her perfume hung oddly out of place, cutting through the diesel and husks. When she turned back to her vehicle, I caught the faint lift of the neighbor's curtain again. Nobody wanted to be caught watching. I held the citation between two fingers, careful not to smudge the ink, and slid it into my shirt pocket. The board, she had said, would meet next week. She said it like a warning, or maybe a promise. In the barn, the quiet settled heavier than the noise outside. I drew the ledger down from the dash, brown leather corners, still sharp pages, still clean. On the first fresh line, I wrote October 14th, 2019. Tractor, rear axle scuff. Time, 4:37. Witness camera, north wall. The red LED blinked again through the window, its reflection caught on the page like a seal of approval. The paper smelled faintly of dust and oil, the ink sinking deep into the grain. I sat for a moment, the hum of the auger winding down. My fingers traced the scuff on the fender, still warm from her SUV's brush. I thought of my grandfather's habit, every receipt, every deed pressed flat in his files. Paper had outlasted storms, taxes, even deaths. I put my faith in the same habit now. The torque wrench waited on the shelf. I slid the ledger beside it, aligned edge to edge. Outside, the red LED blinked twice like a witness refusing to look away. The envelope was the color of a stop sign. It sat on the hall table under the lamp window, flashing my name above the HOA crest. My wife picked it up, squinted through the window, then set it beside the remote as if it were another channel we didn't care to watch. I slid a knife along the top. The paper smelled sharp, freshly printed. Willow Bend Owners Association. The crest in blue. I flattened it, photographed header-footer signature. Read it, Clint. It says, unsightly equipment visible from public way. During harvest, they don't care about harvest. Her jaw tightened. I slipped the letter into a sleeve. In the ledger, I wrote November 4, 2019. Notice received. Photos, header, body signature. The red LED on the front camera blinked in the glass like a witness. The language was clipped, compliance required within 10 days. Failure may result in liens or legal action. My wife folded her arms. 10 days like the corn will wait. They like a clock running. You like one too, she said. I like a record. On the pad she slid across, I penciled a list: photos, cataloged notice, sleeved request minutes, prepare, certified mail. She pointed. Chain of custody. In the ledger's margin I drew a box and labeled it. Empty for now. My phone buzzed. A neighbor's text. Keep your head down. They're in a mood. Another flagpole got me last spring. Said sightline. They fined you for a flag, the pole. Vertical obstruction. You still have the notice box in the garage. Don't text this. I typed porch in 10. He didn't reply, which meant yes. We stood under the porch light, our breath fogging. He kept his hands deep in his pockets. They fined me. Twice, he said. Same sentence every time. You kept copies. My wife writes dates on the box. You can photograph them, just don't write my name. I won't. You didn't hear this from me, he said, eyes on the street. The wind rattled a gate down the block. We parted without a handshake. Back inside, the furnace hummed. On the table, I laid the citation from the field beside tonight's notice. My wife wrapped a sandwich in wax paper. Save everything, she said. I will. Even this, she smiled. I opened the laptop. Drafted. Request minutes. Septiwash Octi. Agenda Novi meeting. Evidence preservation. The printer coughed awake. Warm paper slid out carrying dust smell. I stacked it clipped and slid into a manila envelope. Then I printed the certified form from the bookmarked template. Boxes filled one by one. Name, address, tracking. In the ledger's new chain of custody box, I wrote, Prepared outbound certified November 5. The form landed in the tray ink still wet enough to smear. I held it by the corner until it cooled. The box wasn't empty anymore. At sunrise, I carried the ledger to Miller's diner, breath still white in the air. The man in the corner booth raised a hand, and I noticed he still kept my grandpa's card in his wallet, the embossed lettering worn thin. The diner smelled of bacon fat and coffee grounds. Steam clouded the window beside him, blurring the highway. A waitress clicked her pen and left menus neither of us opened. He tapped the napkin holder once like a gavel. Name your exhibits, he said. I slid the ledger across open to the photographs. The violation notice, the citation folded once the dates in my handwriting. Exhibit A, Notice of Violation, dated. November 4th, Chain of Custody. I boxed it. Ledger entry, November 5, certified form, printed not yet mailed. He nodded. The waitress poured coffee until his glasses fogged. He wiped them, glanced at the header. Section 5.4 requires notice be posted in advance. Do you have minutes proving they voted? I requested them. Not produced. He underlined with a diner pen, ink seeping through. I added, neighbor across the lane, fined for flagpole obstruction. His copies exist. Good. Exhibits B and C, potential corroboration. The waitress refilled me too. The cup rattled on the saucer. You don't shout people down here, he said, eyes gentle but firm. You enter the record. I pulled the certified mail slip from my jacket, slid it across the formica. The green strip looked official even in the weak light. He studied the boxes, circling minutes lien notice requirements. Always mail certified, he said. Return receipt requested. Staple the slip to your ledger. I've got glue tape. Better. Nothing falls loose. We work the slip line by line. Addressee Willow Bend Owners Association, Copayo Secretary. Article number printed in red. He pressed the stamp down with the back of a spoon. Thud. The diner's floor vent hummed warm air against our legs. A boy at another table dropped silverware. The clatter echoed like punctuation. He reached into his satchel and pulled a manila envelope already stamped. This is yours. Place Exhibit A inside. Ledger remains with you. I slid the violation notice into the envelope, folded carefully. Then I tucked the ledger inside my jacket, weight against my chest, not unlike a holster for truth. He leaned back. Remember, every word is either on paper or lost. You want this heard, you build a paper wall. I'll build it. His eyes softened. Your grandfather believed in records. So do I. The door chime rang as a farmer in coveralls came in. The flag outside snapped in the north wind, pointing toward town, toward the post office. They typed my name wrong on the sign-in sheet. One letter off like erasure in miniature. I signed anyway, pen catching on the cheap paper, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The agenda, posted on the wall, already read, Appearance issue ongoing. The decision was written before I even sat down. Stackable chairs clattered as people settled. The air smelled faintly of chlorine drifting from the pool outside. Karen tapped her microphone, lacquered nails clicking against the plastic base. A red binder tab labeled Enforcement was open in front of her. The clerk's voice carried through the small speaker. Roll call, Halbrook, Jensen, Crane. Eyes slid, lungs held. He stamped the packet in front of me. The ink bled a Halo Minutes camera footage on file. My ledger note from 2019. The blinking LED now acknowledged in their own record. Hook paid. Karen leaned forward. This association must maintain standards. Mr. Morell's tractor remains visible from the roadway. Point of order, the footage shows the machine in field use, not storage. Out of scope, she said smoothly, turning a page. The clerk avoided my eyes. He slid a folder closer, then backed away. Karen pulled a letter from inside the HOA seal shining under the lights. This is a lien intent, she said into the mic, voice flat as paperwork. She pushed it across the table. I read the header. Notice of intent to file lien. No hearing date listed. Section 7.2 requires a hearing prior to lien filing. It's not included here. Context matters, she said, not looking up. The board has discretion. For the record, the bylaw reads, "Hearing shall be held." The clerk typed fingers stiff. A chair behind me scraped. Someone coughed. No one laughed. My ledger sat open on my knee, pen balanced. The waitress-style carafe on the side table was nudged as someone passed. Hot coffee sloshed. A brown splash hit the page, curling the corner. I grabbed it, sleeve blotting jaw tight. The tear ripped across a date line I'd written 2 years before. My prop, once pristine, was fractured. Karen's voice pressed on. Non-compliance threatens property values. The microphone made it ring louder than the room deserved. A neighbor cleared his throat, then stayed silent. I slipped the stamped minutes into a folder, the lien letter behind it. When I closed the ledger, the torn corner flapped against the binding like a flag I hadn't chosen to fly. Outside, the night smelled of chlorine and wet asphalt. The stamped halo bled faintly through the minutes in my bag. The fluorescence flickered like a bad heartbeat as the secretary tapped the mic. The agenda at the podium carried my parcel number in bold ink, heavy enough to shine. I held the torn ledger flat on my palm, the ripped corner trembling when the ceiling vent kicked on. "This meeting will come to order," the chair said. "Roll call, please," I said, voice steady, ledger open. The secretary cleared his throat. Halbrook Jensen. Crane Morales. Quorum present. A chair leg under Karen wobbled. She shifted without acknowledging it. Her binder lay open to a red tab Enforcement. Another tab, yellow, read Finance. The minutes at each board seat already carried a pre-printed line. Motion to escalate penalties pending. First item, Karen said. Appearance issue ongoing. Mr. Morrell remains non-compliant. Point of order, a neighbor whispered from the back. Not yet, Karen said, smile practiced. I set the ledger on the table and slid 2 documents forward. Exhibit A, the board, minutes from April stamped by your clerk acknowledging camera footage on file. Exhibit B, the reserve disbursement sheet from June. Context matters, Karen said. The board acted in good faith. Section 5.4 requires proper notice before any enforcement, I said. Section 9 governs reserves. June's repaint came out of reserves without a member vote. The secretary licked his finger and turned the finance packet. Paper snapped under his nail. Line item, pool, refinish partial, he read, eyes uneasy. Karen tapped the gavel. We are here about a tractor. We are here about process, I said. Roll call on the June vote, please. I don't see one in the minutes. There was discussion, Karen said. Consensus was clear. Consensus is not a vote. Sir, she said you are out of order. Then, place me in order, I said, and slid the minutes to the projector cart. Project page 3. The secretary hesitated. Projector project. That pleased the chair, said, glancing at Karen. The fan in the projector whirred to life. The screen blinked, then filled with the grid of numbers. My finger traced the row. Pool, refinish, dispersed from reserves. No motion recorded, no second, no roll call. Members were informed, Karen said. By flyer, I said. Flyers aren't minutes. Reserves require a member vote. A bead of sweat formed under Karen's hairline. This is a distraction from non-compliance. Exhibit C, I said, sliding the stamped minutes from April. Your own record states camera footage on file regarding field use. The tractor was in use, not storage. Enforcement was misapplied. The chair shifted. The wobbling leg creaked again. Let's keep remarks concise. Concise is fine, I said. Enter the record that Exhibit A and B have been presented. Enter the record that Section 7.2 requires a hearing prior to lien. Enter the record that the lien intent letter lacked a hearing date. The secretary typed slow and careful. Keys clicked like raindrops. Karen leaned toward the mic. Mr. Morrell has repeatedly positioned equipment in view, lowering neighborhood standards. Show me the minute where the board voted to define harvest equipment as an appearance issue, I said. I'll wait. We don't need to indulge theatrics, she said. Motion to table enforcement, I said, pending a full member vote on the June reserve disbursement and a hearing properly noticed under Section 7.2. Silence tugged at the room. A board member on Karen's left swallowed, then lifted his hand. I second, he said. The secretary's eyes flashed. He glanced at Karen, then back to the keyboard. Karen rapped the gavel. The head split along an old seam with a dry crack, a sliver loosening like a hangnail. She blinked once, regripped the stem. Objection, she said. This motion is out of order. Point of order, a neighbor said louder this time. A motion and second are on the table. Members will refrain from interruptions, the chair said, but his voice lacked force. I kept my gaze on the exhibits, not Karen. The bylaws don't grant discretion to skip votes or hearings. They require them. Karen's nostrils flared. Again, the board acted in good faith. Good faith has a paper trail, I said. You either have minutes and roll calls or you don't. The secretary cleared his throat. For the record, I'm not locating a roll call for the June item. Karen's smile hardened. We'll correct the record later. You don't correct a vote that never happened, I said. You hold one, Mr. Morel, the chair said. If we were to hypothetically review reserves at the annual meeting, will you agree to store your tractor out of sight in the interim? My tractor is stored when not in use, I said. Field use is not storage. The stamped April minutes already acknowledge footage. Enforcement must match the facts. The wobbling chair leg scraped again. Someone coughed. Pages turned. Pens tapped. Karen flicked a tab in her binder. Fine. New motion affirm prior enforcement and direct counsel to proceed. Out of order, I said. A motion to table is pending. Point of order, the timid board member said, finding a bit of spine. We should vote on the table first. Karen stared at him a beat too long. All right. All in favor of tabling enforcement pending a member vote on reserves and a properly noticed hearing. The secretary's pen hovered. 3 hands went up, including the second. Karen kept hers down. The chair lifted his eyes on the projector where the empty roll call column glowed. Motion carries, the chair said. Karen's lips thinned. Noted, she said the word iced. I slid the ledger closer, the fractured page smoothed under my palm. Enter that vote, I said. Names, please. Recorded, the secretary said. Karen stood. Public comment is closed. Point of information, I said. Please add that Exhibit B was entered reserve disbursement sheet and that a flyer is not a vote. We're done, she said. Then enter done too, I said. Voice still calm. The projector wound down. The fluorescent hum filled the pause. I gathered the exhibits, squared their corners, and closed the ledger gently so the torn page would not catch. The chair lifted the gavel again as if to assert control. When he brought it down, the split head finally gave way. Wood splintered with a sound that seemed too sharp for such a small thing. The echo hung in the room like an accusation. The gymnasium smelled of floor polish and anticipation. Metal chairs faced a folding table where a stack of exhibits rose like a small skyline. Red camera lights blinked above the bleachers. A microphone squeaked, then settled. I set my torn ledger on the table, pages fanned like a broken wing. The clerk read from the agenda. Item 3. Hearing regarding the Morel violation. Chair. State your name for the record. I'm Clint Morel. A few neighbors held folded notices in their laps. Paper made a dry sound when they gripped it. The winter air that followed people in through the doors still clung to coats. Chair, Mr. Morel, you may proceed. I move to enter Exhibit A tonight's agenda and Exhibit B hearing transcript stub. Clerk, Exhibit A and B are logged. I also move to enter Exhibit C. Board minutes from April stamped acknowledging camera footage on file. Karen leaned to the mic. Objection. Relevance. Chair overruled. Exhibit C entered. I slid the reserve disbursement sheet next. The projector fan whirred. Numbers filled the portable screen. Exhibit D reserve use in June without a member vote. A low murmur, then the scrape of a chair leg. Chair. We're here about an appearance violation. I'm here about process and harm. I placed a printed photo on the table, the HOA letter under my wiper blade, my tractor's scuffed fender. Then another photo, a clinic curb painted yellow, my pickup nose to the entrance, a timestamp in the corner. Karen stiffened. Objection assumes facts not in evidence. Clerk. Note the objection. Chair overruled. Proceed, Mr. Morel. I call Emily Hart. She stepped from the front row badge clipped to her sweater. The mic crackled as she took the stand, a rolling chair placed beside the table that everyone pretended was a witness box. Chair. State your name and occupation for the record. Nurse Emily Hart, Boone Family Clinic. Karen Scope. I'll keep it narrow. On October 12th, during harvest, did you see Ms. Halbrook approach the curb at Boone Family Clinic? I did. What did she do? She told Mr. Morel he could not stop at the curb even for drop-off. Karen, objection characterization. Chair overruled. The witness may answer. She held a printed notice. She spoke over the intake nurse. Did the clinic require the curb to stay clear for medical necessity? The nurse pointed to the sign, Patient drop-off only. Was a patient being assisted? A farmhand with a laceration bleeding through a towel. We moved him in quickly. Karen leaned forward. The association has no authority at a clinic. Exactly. Yet you tried to enforce one. Karen's mouth pinched. This is irrelevant to a tractor. It's relevant to pattern and to safety. Chair. Keep your voice even, Mr. Morrell. I will. I placed a thin folder in front of the clerk. Exhibit E, Clinic Incident Note, signed by Charge Nurse. Names redacted, time visible. Clerk Exhibit E is entered. Karen, objection authentication. I brought the charge nurse if needed. Chair. We recognize the witness already on record. Continue. I returned to Emily. Did you see anyone from the board attempt to limit curb access again? Not since. We posted the policy. Did the clinic receive any follow-up from the HOA letter? We forwarded it to risk management. Karen. Objection hearsay. Chair sustained. Strike the last answer. Emily folded her hands. The mic picked up the faint rub of her knuckles. Her eyes moved from Karen to the camera above the bleachers. One last question. Was there any benefit to interrupting intake that day? And she said, it slowed us down. No further questions. Chair. You may step down. I kept my hand on the ledger to steady the torn page. Karen adjusted her papers. The community values order. Mr. Morrell repeatedly order requires votes and hearings. Chair, let her finish. Karen ignores aesthetic standards. He parks machinery where I park machinery in a field during harvest. Your own minutes say camera footage on file. Karen, again irrelevant. Chair, noted. I turned back to the projector. Exhibit F, lien intent, letter served without a hearing date. Clerk entered. Exhibit G. June, reserves dispersed without a member vote. Karen. We acted in good faith. Good faith is in the minutes. Show me the roll call. Silence. The projector hummed a little louder. From the side row, a metal chair scraped. A man stood slow, like the weight of it still clung to him. The chair frowned. Sir Mark Dillon, he said. Former compliance officer. Karen's head snapped. You don't have the floor. Chair Mr. Dillon, do you have information relevant to this hearing? I kept notes, he said, voice raw. My own. Dates you asked me to tape notices without hearings. Times you told me to call it non-compliance whether it fit or not. Karen's face went pale. This is improper. Chair Mr. Dillon, can you submit your notes? He held up a spiral notebook with a cracked spine. Copies. I'll hand them to the clerk. Clerk, Exhibit H. Compliance Officer notes. Karen, objection foundation. Chair, the board will assess weight. Exhibit H is entered. I turned the ledger so the torn corner showed. Pattern matters, so do procedures. You escalated without votes, you noticed liens without hearings, and when I delivered an injured man to a clinic curb, you tried to cite me there too. This is the accumulation of all of it. Karen's voice thinned. He is grandstanding. Chair. We'll have order. A neighbor lifted a folded notice. I got one for a chalk drawing, she said to nobody in particular. Another voice. They fined my flagpole. Another, and the ramp. Karen hit the mic switch, then hit it again when it didn't cut. Feedback squealed a sound that made people flinch. Chair. We will proceed to findings. Karen. I move to affirm the violation. Silence. Chair. Is there a second? The board member, who had broken ranks before, looked at his hands. No second, he said. I move to vacate the violation and suspend enforcement pending a member vote on reserves and a properly noticed hearing under Section 7.2. Clerk, motion on the floor. Chair. Is there a second, said another board member, voice steady. Karen's lips trembled. You'll regret this, she whispered, forgetting her mic was on. The whisper filled the room. Chair, roll call. Clerk Jensen. Yes. Morales. Yes. Halbrook. No. Chair. Yes. Clerk, motion carries. The room took a breath together, the kind that sounds like a wave. Phones lifted, a camera flashed. Karen's eyes landed on the ledger's torn edge, the stain from the coffee in April, now a darker ring. Chair. The board recognizes community comment. Hands rose, but the sound that carried was the soft thud of the clerk stamping Exhibit H. The mic squeaked again, then steadied. I closed the ledger gently. The fractured page lay flat under my palm, the way a healed bone still remembers its break. Karen stared at the stack of exhibits as if they were moving. She said nothing. The cameras blinked red. Neighbors filmed her silence, and for once, nobody looked away. The firehouse coffee tasted scorched, a little like old toast, but the company steadied me more than caffeine ever could. Morning light came through the bay doors in a pale sheet, catching the dull shine of helmets lined on their hooks. The day room hummed with the radiator and the soft tick of the clock above the bulletin board. My grandpa's law partner sat across from me. Sleeves rolled, spectacles pushed up his forehead, a repaired binder clip resting beneath his palm like a chess piece waiting to be moved. He looked at the ledger lying open between us. The torn page lay tamed under the new clip edges squared again. He lifted the clip with 2 fingers and set it down where the rip began a small ceremony that made the leather look steadier. "Your record held," he said. "It held because they finally had to read it," I said. "They read it because you made it unavoidable." The radio on the counter hissed and popped. A crewman walked through with a stack of towels, nodded, and left the door swinging behind him. The coffee pot coughed in its cradle, reluctant to be useful. "Karen will consider an appeal," the mentor said. I figured as much. "An appeal is paper too," he said. "You like that? Paper behaves. I like when it behaves." He opened his satchel and pulled out a thin file folded around a yellow slip. He flattened it beside the ledger. It was an inspection log dated the spring before the collision, our parcel number typed along the top. "Permit and inspection," he said. "County classified your tractor as mobile equipment when used for agricultural purposes. Not a structure." I read the line aloud, the words clipped in the way I preferred. Equipment, not structure. He tapped where the inspector's initials sprawled in quick strokes. Entered after a spring check of culverts and drive pads. Somebody did their job. Now it can do yours. It belongs in the record, I said. Then enter it, he said. File a notice of supplemental exhibit with the board. Copy the clerk. Mail certified. Return receipt, I said. Always. The coffee tasted burnt on my tongue. It made me think of the gym's floor polish, the metallic squeal of the mic as Karen tried to cut it. The weight in my chest that had been tight for months felt looser this morning, not gone, but looser like a strap 1 notch off. He slid the binder clip to me. "Hold the tear with this until you can have the page backed. Repairs should be visible, not invisible." "Visible, like a scar," I said. "Scars remind you how you got here," he said. The radio cracked again. Someone called across the bay to ask about a hose test. The mentor ignored it with the ease of a man who had learned how to let noise move through him. "Tell me what you learned in the gym," he said. "That procedure doesn't bend just because someone wants it to. That neighbors speak when they see a path. That a ledger can feel heavier than a tractor." He smiled with his eyes. "Add this to the path." He tapped the inspection log. "It will close one of the doors she likes to rattle. Equipment, not structure," I said again. "Say it at the table. Make their minutes carry it." He reached for the binder clip and pinched it once as if testing its spring. Then he slid it back into place with a click that sounded more final than it should have. "How's your wife?" he asked. "Sleeping better," I said. She said the gym felt like a weather change. "Storm's not done," he said. "I know. Then build the wall higher," he said, with shorter sentences. A crewman drifted in and poured himself a cup, grimaced at the pot, and waved at us like he was apologizing for the taste. He leaned against the counter and watched the street through the high window. "People are asking if the board will pay back the fines," he said. "They will if the minutes make them," I said. "Minutes make a lot of people," the mentor said. The radio tone lifted into a long, rising beep. It wasn't our district. The dispatcher named a county road to the west. Still, the crewman froze for a second the way you do when a sound trains you to listen. "Evidence has to answer quicker than sirens," the mentor said. "That's the plan," I said. He pointed his pen at the ledger. "Write your next 3 moves." "Supplemental exhibit with inspection log," I said. "Request agenda item to update classification language. Draft a motion to refund penalties issued under misused reserves." "Good," he said. "Draft the motion in plain English. Let them trip over the clarity." "Plain English is a tool," I said. "It is a blade," he said. I wrote the list down under the day's date. The binder clip held the page with a grip that felt more deliberate than a spine ever could. "Keep your sentences short in the letter," he said. "I will. Put the article number from the green slip in the top right corner. Already do. Write the time you hand the envelope to the clerk," he said. "Down to the minute," I said. "Good," he said again. "You're almost there." We sat in the low noise a while. The bay smelled faintly of rubber and ash and old soap. The mentor folded the inspection log back into the file, then unfolded it again, made a copy on the firehouse machine, and slid both across to me, one labeled for the board. one for my file. He stamped the copy with the station's received stamp, the ink thudding into the paper like a small, satisfying hammer. "Stationers love stamps," he said, half amused. "People do too when they're nervous," I said. He nodded at the ledger. "You never tried to hide the tear. It happened in the room," I said. "It deserves to show." He stood with a quiet stiffness and slid his wallet out the corner of my grandpa's card still living behind his driver's license. He tapped it once with a fingernail. "Tell your grandfather we're still working," he said. "He already knows I said. He trained this ledger." He laughed once soft. "Go home and mail something." "I will." The radio tone glided down into silence. The crewman set his mug in the sink, shrugged into his jacket, and ducked out to the bays. The day had the brightness of a field after rain. I put the inspection log into a clear sleeve, wrote the exhibit letter in pencil at the top, and slid it under the clip with the torn page. The pages pressed together with a friction I trusted. The clip shone like something new pretending to be old. "Call me if the envelope has teeth," the mentor said. "It usually does," I said. "Bite back with paper," he said. "I intend to." He raised 2 fingers a goodbye, the age of a courthouse, and left me with the burnt coffee and the ledger's weight. I turned the binder clip 1 notch tighter. It held without complaint. When I pulled into the drive, the mailbox flag stood up bright red against the ditch grass. The hinge creaked when I opened the door. Inside was a single windowed envelope, the stop sign color I knew too well. I held it by its corner so I wouldn't smear whatever story the paper planned to tell next. By spring 2023, the amended bylaw carried a fresh seal that gleamed under the hall's lights. The community hall smelled faintly of paper and varnish, a cleaner scent than the chlorine and polish of past meetings. I placed my ledger restored with new binding across the torn page on the long oak table. Its cover no longer curled the first page pressed flat. Neighbors filled the folding chairs. There was no gavel on the podium tonight. Instead, a fresh print of the amended rules hung on the corkboard edges held with brass tacks. The fluorescent hum above seemed less sharp, softened by the low murmur of voices. The clerk rose a folded paper in his hand. Item 1. Presentation of the amendment. Section 7.2. Hearings required before any lien or enforcement. Section 9. Reserve funds require a member vote recorded in the minutes. He unrolled the document. The waxy seal cracked softly as the fold flattened. Karen sat in the front row, hands in her lap, binder closed. Her eyes tracked the seal but never lifted to mine. A neighbor spoke first. "I'm Mrs. Larkin. I served in the Army. I kept every form they ever gave me. Tonight I want to thank Clint for showing us that paper still protects." Applause rustled short and respectful. The chair nodded. Another stood. They fined me for my flagpole. "Tonight, I ask we remember that a flag's worth isn't in obstruction, but in meaning." The clerk recorded each statement, tapping keys with steady rhythm. I opened the ledger slowly. The binder clip that once held the torn page now rested in my pocket, a relic of fracture. Tonight, the page lay smooth, repaired backing invisible, unless you touched it. I let Karen see me turn to the first entry, the October 2019. Scuffed the photograph print the time I'd written under the barn clock. This ledger, I said quietly, began as defense. It ends as community. The board sat behind folding tables, shoulders squared differently than before. No red enforcement tab showed only manila folders with the new amendment inside. Chair motion to adopt the amendment as presented. Member, so moved. Another second. Chair, all in favor. Hands rose across the table. Even the timid member lifted his without looking around. The clerk called names one by one. Each voice answered yes. Karen's hands stayed in her lap. She didn't raise them. Chair motion carries unanimously. The ledger rested open under my palm. I smoothed the first page once more, the paper firm, the tear now only a line in memory. Karen glanced at it just long enough to see what was healed. Mentor sat at the back tie, loosened, coffee in hand. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. The clerk posted the amendment on the corkboard. The tack popped into place with a clean sound. The hall grew quiet, not in fear, but in rest. Chair, any further comment? A woman from the third row said softly, "It feels lighter here." The chair nodded. Meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped, but the sound was different. No rush, no tension. Outside, children's laughter carried through the open windows. They played tag in the grass, their shouts brighter than any gavel. I closed the ledger. For once, it felt less like a shield and more like a history book. By the time the clerk pressed the new seal against the minutes, the room let out a breath it had held for years. My ledger, once torn, rested polished on the table, its first page smoothed flat for everyone, Karen included, to see. I realized the law never needed anger, only receipts, votes, and the patience to bind them together. Refund checks slid into envelopes like small apologies, and the amended bylaw shone brighter than any gavel. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. If your own street has weathered unfair notices, where did you and your neighbors finally draw the line?